being a yoga teacher can be freaking hard sometimes, right? Especially if you don't have anybody to talk to. Somebody you can talk to in a real way where you can tell them what's really going on with you and actually feel supported and come away empowered. Well, I've been getting that from my weekly teachers class. I've been amazed by what's happening there. Teachers who've been teaching for a long time, teachers who just came out of their training, all coming to it in such a genuine and authentic way, asking important questions like, can you be an effective teacher if you're suffering from depression? Or how much to charge if you're hosting someone for a workshop? But more than anything, it's just a place where you can really be heard and talk about the things that are relevant to you and in a way that's non-judgmental and supportive. So I love it. It's like my favorite thing every week. And you can get in on it too. It's the J. Brown Yoga Weekly Teachers Class. You can find it at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, here we are. This is J. Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is J. Brown, and you are listening, and I am grateful for that. If you're new, welcome, welcome. Everyone else, what's up? How are you? I hope I'm finding you in a favorable moment. And if not, that things can start getting better as of right now. Mike Huggins from the Transformation Yoga Project is on the show today. But first, let me take care of something. Let me say something about this comment I made last week. If you were listening, you might know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't, but I made this comment about yoga teacher training money being dirty money. And a number of people reached out to me with some concern over that comment. Let me just say that I do think I may have been a little bit reckless with my words, but I still stand by the sentiment, and I was definitely including myself in it, and I was not trying to suggest that teacher training is bad. I've also talked about teacher training in terms of what's good about it, how it's really where people are going to explore yoga in a deeper way now. And I've had incredible experiences conducting yoga teacher training. I know many of you listening have probably had wonderful experiences participating in teacher training. So I'm not trying to say that teacher training is bad. What I'm trying to point to is something else that has to do with the way that we've created these economic instruments, this 200, 300, 500 hour premium priced teacher training packages that we've all just acquiesced to, because we need to make a living and that's what the industry market standard is. But it doesn't have to be that way. We do have the power to change that. And that's really what I buried last week, which I didn't mention enough, which is the good news in a sense, which is that I actually made more money not doing teacher training than I did when I was doing the teacher trainings. And I think that the problem is that I think it's a bit of a bubble that's been created, and I think it's bursting, and I think a lot of people listening to this might have a sense of that as well. And more importantly, it's possible for us to imagine something better. And that is what I wrote about in my blog post this month, which is posting this week. It's probably up right now when you're listening to this. You can go to the website and read it. And for those of you who know me long enough before I had this podcast, when I only had the blog, it's interesting to see how last week when I was just speaking off the cuff, it's not like I plan these intros out carefully or consider all my comments beforehand. I'm really just speaking from how I'm feeling in this moment, taking that like initial train of thought and then creating something out of it, which is what my blog is, where I really try to boil it down to some words that I think communicate ideas and potentially invite inquiry. It's interesting to see how the raw thinking ends up into something. So I just want everybody to know that I didn't mean to suggest that anybody out there who's doing teacher training is somehow like a horrible person who's a crook or something. That's not what I meant to suggest. But I do want us all to question it. I never questioned selling 200-hour teacher training. It's what everybody did, and it's what I did. And if we are going to do it, if we are going to use this 200 hours, even though I don't know that we need to, but even if we are, then I do think that there's ways to do it that are more about long-term relationships and less about these jolts of cash that you can't rely upon and that have caused us to compromise ourselves. You know, for all of the people who feel that the $3,000 they spent on their teacher training was worth every penny, there's probably hundreds who aren't so sure. And then there's like even more who could never even afford it to begin with. So I do think it's possible for us to have other ways of transmitting yoga and helping facilitate people who want to become teachers, and have that be a separate thing from people who just want to study more. See, that's the thing. A lot of people, right, they do the trainings, and it's not necessarily like they're really in a place where they're ready to train as a teacher. It's just that's where you go to study more. And the thing is, if we're trying to raise the standard of yoga teacher training to be certified as a teacher, then that would mean that you would deny entry to someone who's really not at a place in their practice that it would make sense to do a training to become a teacher. And frankly, if you've got a really high overhead and you need the money really bad because the rent is due, you're not going to do it. You're not going to turn somebody away, even if it's totally not necessarily. You're going to do what we do, which is, oh, well, it could be if you want to become a teacher or if you just want to go deeper into your practice, right? We do that gray thing. And that's where the compromising is happening. And I'm not blaming the center owners. I'm not blaming the teacher trainers. I'm not blaming anybody. And believe me, I did it. I did teacher training myself. I may do teacher training again. But you know what? If I do teacher training again, I will have to admit that I'm doing it because I need the money more than because it's the best thing for yoga. So anyways, I don't know if I just got myself in a little bit deeper with that last comment, but I have fleshed it out more. And I think tried to give some more proactive suggestions about things that we could actually do. Like I've offered some potential ideas about what we could do to actually create something better, which is the best way to disrupt something dysfunctional, right? Just create something better. So in any case, go read the blog, send me some emails, tell me what you think. Now, as I mentioned, Mike Huggins is with us today. Mike is the founder of Transformation Yoga Project, and he was on the show before 2 years ago. You should go back and listen to it. He has an incredible story. He was the CEO of a big company. He ended up in prison. He created this organization to bring yoga into the prisons. And Mike's just a really down-to-earth and great guy. I also know Mike to be a man of numbers. We served on a board together, and whenever I was in one of these board meetings, Mike was always the guy who seemed to be holding us to the spreadsheets, which is very apropos for a lot of the things I've been talking about recently, as you may know. And I did get into some of that with Mike. And we also just talk about yoga and service in general, because that is a big thing where people who have become disenchanted with the commodification side of it and the business side of it, a lot of people want to move into service. And it's not as easy as everyone thinks. And Mike knows that. And he's someone who is able to speak candidly and from an informed place on these matters. So I was very excited to reconnect with him again, and I'm excited for you to get to hear it today. Now, before we get to that, let me tell you about this thing that happened to me this week. My eldest daughter, she's 9 years old, and she was deemed ready to get her ears pierced. And somehow I got designated as the one to take her to the mall, to Claire's, to have it done. And it was a wonderful moment. I got to see how brave and awesome my kid is. But while we were there, she was like begging me to buy all these earrings for her. And I refused to do it because they were piece of shit earrings that I wasn't going to buy for my daughter. And then also, I've really been a little bit neglectful of my wife, and she was long overdue for a romantic gesture. But where am I going to go to buy jewelry? I'm going to go to our new sponsor, Ana Luisa Jewelry. And I'm going to go to Ana Luisa Jewelry not just because they had everything I need. They had traditional basic stuff. I just needed some simple hoops for my daughter. And they had way more contemporary cool stuff. Like for my wife, I got her this necklace with a pendant. And their stuff is really responsibly sourced. Did you have any idea that it takes 20 tons of earth mining to produce a single ring of gold? And that's why brands don't ever tell you where they get their gold from? Well, Ana Luisa uses 100% recycled gold. And they also don't mark up their prices 10 times because they're selling direct to you. And as a listener of this show, you can get 10% off if you go to analuisa.com/jbrown. That's Ana Luisa, ANALUISA, analuisa.com/jbrown. Go check it out. Also, I want to speak to anyone listening to this who is managing or running a studio. I need to put the word KarmaSoft in your ear again. You heard me talking about KarmaSoft. They're our longest standing sponsor, and it's a complete online studio management solution. It's the software that I used when I had my center. And Rudy Senecal, the owner of KarmaSoft, he's been on the show before. Go back and listen to the episode. He runs his company in a really different way. It's going to be way better than MindBody Online. And I know it's scary, the idea of transferring over your operations from MindBody Online to something else. But I got to tell you, I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me about what they're dealing with MindBody Online. And it's just, you don't have to. There is another possibility, and you can make yourself a lot easier. You can do all the same scheduling of the classes and accounting and payroll. You can do all that stuff in a way that's far more easier and efficient and not such a headache and more reasonably priced. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. KarmaSoftOnline.com. Last thing here, let me drop my stuff. I am going to be in Allentown, Pennsylvania, May 4th. I'm going to be in Australia, May 25th through June 2nd. 3 different places, Sydney, Gold Coast, and Melbourne. Australia, May 25th through June 2nd. I'm also going to be in Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Institute, June 17th through the 21st. And I'm going to be back at the Feathered Pipe Ranch in Helena, Montana, August 17th through 24th. You can find out about those gigs and more. You can listen to the archives of this podcast and read that blog I was talking about, as well as find all of my online yoga video offerings. All of my stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. All right, then. I think that's fine. I will touch base with you on the other side and tell you about a few things as I like to do. But for now, let's do it. Let's get to this conversation that I had with Mike Huggins. Hello?
Jay?
Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing real well, thanks. It's been a long time, huh?
You know, I was just looking at that, and next month it'll be 2 years.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really been 2 years, Jay. Wow.
Yes. It was March 2017. Actually, it's been 2 years because that was when it posted. So it was actually weeks before that. So it's basically 2 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Well,
Doesn't seem like that long.
it doesn't seem like that long. No, it doesn't. A lot of stuff's happened. Most of it good too. So that's
Well, that's good to hear. Good to find out.
yeah.
That's why I wanted to check in with. That's when you emailed me, I was like, of course I'd like to talk to Mike again. And also, Mike, there were some other things I sort of had in mind that I was sort of curious to talk to you about that we can maybe get to later. Just because I know you're a numbers guy.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about numbers these days. So I don't know. I thought I might pick your brain a little bit on some of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was thinking about, with the conversation today, but, I kind of have my foot in like three different worlds. The one is, we talked earlier about yoga service. Maybe we talk later about it. But I mean, in order to do yoga service, you still have to have one foot in the business world because there's got to be some way to value what you do. And then at the same time, you need to provide a service that people are willing to pay. And then, of course, many people in service want to do things like social justice and things that are out there that are really meaningful and important. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of people out there willing to pay for those kind of things. And so,
yes, there's some things they'll pay for and some things they won't, right?
Sure. And so that's the challenge for those who go down this road, is to figure out, how to manage that. And that's, anyway.
Well, that's exactly kind of what I had in mind. So we're thinking the same. But before we get into that more, which I definitely was one of the main things I want to talk to you about, but it's been 2 years. Last time I talked to you, you had another book that came out with just like more your personal story.
That was, Going Home.
Yes.
Yes. And that book's done pretty well. And do you know, I don't know if you're in the same circles, but like Timber Hawkeye, do you know him at all?
I know of him, but I don't know him.
So Timber is a good friend of mine. He's the Buddhist boot camp guy, and he does a lot of social media postings, and he's got a lot of interesting things. But he actually formed a publishing company. So Timber and I have become pretty good friends, and he published that book, and he actually is the same guy who's published this Yoga for Recovery book. And
cool. Well, how did that go for you after that book came out? Did things change for you at all after that came out? And it was a really crazy story. If anybody listening to this, they should go back and listen to it. We talked about it last time you came on, your whole story of being a CEO and then going to jail and the whole thing. And it made some pretty big news. I saw you in some other news outlets too. So I'm sort of curious, did things change at all for you after that became a more public story?
Well, what I would tell you, Jay, is this, that, talking with you, first of all, I appreciate your approach and direct style. So it was actually, for me personally, it was more of a coming out because it's just not something that we're proud of. It's an event in our life and that we're not proud of, but it's important. It's part of my history, and so I think on a personal level, it gave me more confidence to speak openly about it, and particularly from your podcast. I had quite a few people reach out to me with similar stories about this message, at least that I try to think about, is that where you are doesn't define who you are. And that seemed to resonate with a lot of people who reached out and said, I get it. I mean, I'm struggling right now, or I might have an addiction problem, or I might be in a bad family situation, or I might even be incarcerated, but that doesn't necessarily define who I am. And so I've tried to take that to heart, and it's kind of given me the courage to be a little bolder in some of the actions we're doing with Transformation Yoga Project. And so that's been very, very helpful. It's opened up some doors, and I think it allows people to see that the things we talk about with yoga and trauma and trying to figure out how that comes together, I'm somewhat of a living example of it, and so I think people can relate to that. And so it's been to answer your question, it's been a very positive experience for me, and certainly a real helpful thing for Transformation Yoga Project.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And if the podcast had anything to do with it, I'm super psyched about that. And for me, it's sort of I don't know if it's a technique or a practice that I've employed, and I do so on this show a lot, which is, if you're able to do it, it's terribly uncomfortable and vulnerable, and sometimes it's more appropriate than others. But if you do sort of expose the things that you're most insecure about, you don't have any secrets. You don't have any secrets. There's something very liberating about that, you know?
Exactly. That's a great way to say it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, so the other place I knew you from is because I did that little stint on the board that we were on together. And so I remember you're in Philadelphia doing Transformation Yoga Project, right?
Correct. So we're in the greater Philadelphia. So since the last time we've talked, we've kind of grown exponentially. It's really been quite an amazing thing to experience. So we're in the greater Philadelphia area where we have a lot of programs in the center city, in the city of Philadelphia. But we also are very, very active. There's 6 counties outside of Philadelphia, and we're in all those counties, including Delaware, and starting to do some work in New Jersey. And so our programs are focused along 3 lines. I think last time we spoke, we had 2 main areas of focus of service. One was the justice system, justice reentry systems, which we still are very, very active there. And also in recovery, work in a lot of inpatient hospitals, recovery centers. And a third area that we've been working, but it's sort of just grown to a point where it's its own thing now, and that is youth services, where whether there's youth that are dealing with detention, or they're in shelters because of poor family situations or some behavioral issues. So that's become another focus for us. But it's all, I would say, trauma sensitive or trauma oriented, whether the people we work with have experienced trauma, which virtually they all have, but some of them have actually given trauma to others, and that's a form of trauma too. So that is, I'd say, the common thread of what drives us at this point.
Well, it's interesting to hear you use these expression, trauma sensitive, trauma oriented. Like even the other day, I was having a discussion is the difference between, trauma aware or trauma sensitive, or is a class informed by these ideas, or is it specifically for people with trauma? Like the what comes after the hyphen so can sometimes make a difference in terms of the context that gets set.
It does. Honestly, Jay, we don't focus so much on, at least I don't, because the populations that we're targeting and we serve, honestly, they don't care. They don't care one way. The definition of yoga, in fact, we can argue about that too. And so we are really focused on providing tools for self-inquiry and tools for resiliency in themselves, and ways to handle conflict or the challenges that they face in life. And we happen to believe that yoga is a way of doing that, connecting the mind and the body, and trying to find peace between the two. So the semantics of it, quite honestly, I don't get into that debate because it is a theoretical debate, and we're really in the not so much theory. We're in the real world of real people with real issues, but I hear you. I hear you.
Your point is very well taken, because it's one thing to wax poetic about whether you're trauma sensitive or trauma aware. It's another thing to actually go into a prison and try to teach a yoga class. People say, well, what lineage do you follow? I'm like, what lineage do we follow?
Yeah. I said we don't follow. We follow a lineage of providing basic tools for not judging yourself, and whatever lineage that is. And maybe it's all the lineages, but it's to deliver these basic tools of yoga to those who, if we start talking about lineage, they would not even want to be involved, if you will.
Well, other thing I heard you say in there that I think is interesting, and why a lot of people are interested in maybe going in a more service direction, is you're presenting practice as a form of self-inquiry and conflict resolution more than like a fitness thing. So it's sort of understood when they're coming into the class, it's not necessarily about a workout. They pump weight or whatever, do other kinds of workouts, that this is about these other ideas, which I think is an important starting point.
It is, and interestingly, since the last time we talked, in fact, I might even mention, our hook, particularly the work in the justice system, if we're working with incarcerated men and women, has been, hey, this is a great way to, if you're working out lifting weights and you have an off day, this is a great way to stretch. That was sort of the hook. And we don't really need, so fast forward 2 years later, and we don't really need that hook so much anymore because, at least in our area, the Philadelphia area, there's been an acceptance or an understanding that yoga is more than that. And so the people who are now coming to our programs are hearing a lot about word of mouth. And whether it's through our particular programs or just in general about how yoga can be part of a healing modality. So it's quite interesting. The dynamics have really changed just in 2 short years that I think there seems to be an impact. It's getting down into the masses, at least the populations that we serve, that they're starting to understand that they come to a yoga class, they're going to expect to get more than just some physical movement. And that is different than it was a few years ago, for sure.
So you think like inmates come, or I don't know, the people that you're serving come already a little bit more open to it? Because I remember you describing when you were teaching classes there and trying to win those guys over, do you think that there is more, even amongst the people, the population that you're trying to get to, there's more awareness?
Absolutely, for sure. So when I was starting back, years ago doing this, it was basically, guys were asking me, hey, Mike, can you give me 6-pack abs?
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying that in our first conversation, yeah.
And I'm saying, well, I can give you a good workout without equipment. And that was the hook. And then, I think we talked about the cascade there, that eventually they come back and say, Mike, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sleeping a little better and I'm just feeling a little better. And I feel like I'm under control. And that was, and that happens still today. But, and that's really great to see. And we certainly don't have expectations that we're expecting everybody to have these major breakthroughs. But if they can sleep a little better, or they can fight the urge or an impulse to do drugs, then that's a huge success. But having said that, we are finding that seems to be a greater awareness, and maybe that's because we've been doing this now for 6 years, believe it or not, and we've been able to go much deeper into some of these facilities, and having some longevity there, that the word of mouth has been pretty good. Say, hey, this yoga thing is not what you think it is. It's pretty deep, and if you're ready to come, this could be a great thing for you.
Wow, I think that makes a lot of sense too in that kind of context. When you talk about it as a means of learning how to engage in conflict resolution. I just recently spoke to Rama Jyoti Vernon. I don't know if you know who she is, but she was this very early yoga teacher who kind of exited the more commercial scene, and what she ended up doing was like conflict resolution among warring governments. And and she talked all about like meeting with these heads of states and countries and basically just employing yoga with them, and how much she was able to take those principles and find ways to get people who were normally in conflict to find more mutual ground. So it makes a lot of sense that there's applications in terms of people who are struggling in system and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've been practicing some point along the way, find that you can rediscover your own humanity, and then eventually start to see that in others, and how we react to certain things is not always indicative of who we are deep down. It's somehow maybe a defense mechanism we use, or somehow we've been conditioned to do things. And I think somehow yoga allows us to be a little more sensitive to those kinds of feelings when you're working with somebody, particularly if you're living, if you're incarcerated, where you have to deal with that 24/7, and or if you're in a recovery facility where there's lots of drama and lots of coming and going and ups and downs and people falling off the wagon, and there's a lots of opportunity to judge others, and I think if we can just espouse with these yoga principles about about not judging others, not judging ourselves, then that's a big step along the way for us.
And I remember when we spoke last, you had specifically mentioned that you had started to work more and more with people in recovery. Like you had started first in the prisons, but then you had started to do more of this like outpatient when people were getting out of prison. And that seems to be the direction you went in more, maybe, right?
Well, it's, yes, to answer your question, for a variety of reasons, though. So the first thing I would say is that the two intersect, particularly if you are working with populations that are a little less economic resources, if you will. Typically, if they've got a drug or alcohol problem, they've had exposure to the justice system, and whether they've been incarcerated, whether they've been in programs, whether they've been typically been arrested multiple times, and so there's definitely a crossover there. In fact, we have a very active program here in Philadelphia with drug court. And so it's a diversion program where these individuals were sentenced to go to prison, but they are in this program to keep them out of prison. And yoga is now being offered as one of the programs. It's a mandatory program for them to successfully complete. Otherwise, they go into prison. So they definitely overlap. Although what I would say is that...
Wait, can I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Who mandated yoga? Like, how did that... That's very interesting. Like, you have to do yoga or go to prison.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So this is what I was trying to say, that over time, there just seems to be, again, we've been doing this for 6 years, and we've had really consistent, amazing instructors, and that's something maybe we could touch on about yoga service, but we've been blessed with just unbelievably dedicated and talented yoga instructors who work in the recovery field and behavioral health field with us. And we've had a judge become aware of our programs in the county systems, and there's a push, certainly here locally, but I think even nationally, there's a push to try to find diversion programs so that they can reduce the prison population. And so there was a diversion program developed, and this judge heard about yoga. We approached them with our program, and the judge said yes. And so we've been doing that program, I think, now for about 5 months. And in fact, we are now using the book that I wrote, we wrote Yoga for Recovery book, is being used as the curriculum for that program. And that's kind of nice. We're getting great feedback for the approach we're taking. But yes, so a judge has actually heard about it, very receptive to yoga as a way to support additional therapy that they're getting. And we're all up and running.
Wow, that's exciting. We'll get to the book. I'm curious, though. You say you've been doing this for 6 years. Have you guys been like collecting data? Do you do surveys so that you can show? Because I know that was like an issue when I was on the board.
Yeah.
That you got to be able to show that the programs are successful, like on paper. Have you guys been doing that?
Yes and yes. So to me, when we start talking about yoga service, I think that's one of the elements that is, to me personally, is critical, is to be able to show not only that we're doing amazing, community work or social justice work. That's all fine and dandy, but at the end of the day, the people who write the checks want to see evidence and results. And so we've been taking recording the results of our programs for about 3 years now. Both in the justice system with our youth programs and also in the recovery systems. Now, we've been doing that, I would say, internally. We've had some guidance from outside to help with the wording of questionnaires and all of that. But we are just now starting a full-blown IRB-approved research study at one of the prisons. We have a 200-hour teacher training program underway at one of the maximum security state prisons, and that program is going to be outside studied. It'll be a peer-published review. So that is the next level for us, is to get publishable data in a reputable journal, peer-reviewed journal. That is the next step we're going, and we've just started that process.
So that's going to be a 200-hour training with inmates?
Yes. So we've done this. This is our third group of men. We call it a peer-to-peer training, and we've also done a smaller training with a group of women upstate Pennsylvania. But this group, yes, there's 25 men enrolled, and they have anywhere from, most of them have long sentences to life sentences, and most of them have been participating in our yoga program for a few years now, and now they've really expressed a strong interest to take the next level to become yoga instructors. And we already have a few instructors at that prison, and they're doing amazing work. They're going much deeper into the facility than we could ever hope to do. I'll give you an example. We've had a class where we have generally, let's say, 20 men who participate, and we feel good about that because it's a very deep and meaningful program. But when you consider that there's, probably close to 3,000 men in that facility and only a few yoga classes, we're barely scraping the surface. So if we can train the trainers, which we've done now, this is the third group we're going through, we're seeing amazing results that they're going down the line. And they're awesome teachers because they're living it every day. It's not something they turn on or turn off. It's having to try to live that yogic life, if you will, 24/7 after the class is done, because they're in the chow hall with them, or they're in the yard with them, their peers. So it is a full immersion, and in fact, I would say we're learning as much from them as we are trying to teach them.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I know Desikachar used to say that the best teacher is a teacher who understands your situation or comes from your situation, that you sort of share. So like, as you even said to me last time we spoke, like somebody who knows what it is to be in prison knows how to talk to somebody who's in prison better than someone who doesn't.
Correct.
And so in a way, they are better equipped to be yoga teachers to the people there than people who don't know what it's like to be in there.
They are, but it's tricky. I'll tell you this, Jay.
Yeah, I was just going to see. You went where I went. The other voice in my head said, "But wait a second, there's probably some issues as well."
Well, there's, in anywhere, right? In life, there's power dynamics.
Yeah.
And in prison, you can imagine the power dynamics are pretty intense. And so the power dynamics are such, if you're an instructor, just like any yoga teacher, I think people can see if you're not authentic, or if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, to try to gain some sort of advantage or leverage over people. And that's obviously a lot, or a part of what goes on within the justice system and prison system. So for the instructors, a big part of it is them is to let go of that and to meet, just like we say, any instructor, meet your students where they are. And so they've been able to do that. I have to say it is really just an amazing thing to watch, to deal with the egos and the pressures that they're under. And in some cases, there's violence involved, and they've got to deal with that and just navigate that. I'll give you one example. And this is, clearly an indictment of the justice system itself, but we all know that there's a disproportional percentage of men of color incarcerated. And, from personal experience, it's just unbelievable how bad it is, and how we won't go into this idea of white privilege and all that. I think we might have talked about that in the past, but it's still there. But we have a lot of men who are they're Muslim, right? But they have a high interest in yoga, and so the question is, some of the traditional yoga practice is against Islam as far as, for example, child's pose. Bowing before somebody other than Allah is a problem. And so,
couldn't child's pose be to Allah?
Well, it could be, but we've worked through that. So my point of that is that we've got such a good, dedicated group of yogis here that these hurdles are we're learning how to navigate that, so that these men who are becoming teachers can go back into their little community, into their unit, their wing, and they can address these real issues. So we can try to talk about violence, or talk about how to handle that. But they're really helping us to navigate through that, so that they can be great advocates of this yoga philosophy. And so I bring that up as an example, because there are things there that there's a pushback that yoga is contrary to certain belief systems, and by having open, honest conversations, you can only have those conversations in where you've got a trust established, right? And there's this quasi-safe environment, which I say quasi because there's no safe environment in prison, but where at least we can have these conversations, and people feel like their word is protected. And so we can navigate through that. And we've been developing these sort of best practices for handling these situations. So, our ultimate goal is to make these tools more accessible. And we can't make them more accessible until we understand the issues that these men and these women are facing. So, anyway, it's a long answer to your question.
No, I get it. And it's interesting to me in terms of how what's happening in your programs is it's not at all dissimilar to what happened outside of your programs, in the sense that we're drop-in classes provide a certain something to people. When folks want some kind of more deeper inquiry, teacher training is kind of where it happens now. That's kind of the format. Yep. And that also is because of the structure. See, it's an interesting thing. I'm usually railing against the 200-hour structure, but I could see for your purposes, that's kind of helpful, because you can pitch that. It's a 200-hour thing. You know what I mean? Again, you need those sort of objective metrics when it's when you're dealing with bureaucratic institutions and stuff.
Yeah, and I would say, Jay, our 200 hours are maybe a little different, because most 200-hour programs, they have contact hours, they have study hours. Because of the environment we're in, it's almost all face-to-face time. So it's intense.
Yeah.
It's intense, and we explore things that I wish I had explored in my 200-hour process.
Well, that's very interesting to me, and it makes me think, though, and you said this before in terms of highly qualified teachers. I don't think I feel qualified to go in and do a teacher training with guys in prison. So, and I feel pretty confident about my ability to teach yoga. It's just, you have to know about that context, and those conversations that happen in there are not the same kind of conversations that are happening in my, weekly teachers meeting, what sort of things do you think teaching in that environment are required that you would not necessarily normally be getting in other kinds of teacher training? Or am I wrong? Could I do it if I just was open and I talked to people who know, I just wonder,
yeah.
Because it sounds like when you're dealing with people who are in prison, that would mean you need to have a psychology degree, but maybe they're just people and you don't.
They're just, exactly. That's kind of where I was getting. So what I would say is, at the end of the day, right, it's yoga. And so if we all hopefully can embrace some of the core philosophies of yoga, the yamas and niyamas, we spent a huge amount of time on the yamas and niyamas, because that is such a practical guide for how any of us, but particularly those who are incarcerated, can live their lives. And it's something tangible that they can rely on. And we don't necessarily call them by their Sanskrit names, but we certainly talk about every aspect. But similar to any kind of yoga class, I would say, is you have to meet them where they are. And for us, that means it's a respect. that we know that they're there for a reason, for a crime that was committed. In most cases, it's probably a serious crime. So we acknowledge that. We don't necessarily react to it. I always say in my story that we're not there to judge. They've already been judged. That's in my mind, the only person whose job is to judge is a judge. And all those men and women, they've been judged by somebody to have committed a crime, in many cases a serious crime. So it's not our job as a yoga instructor to judge them again. And so we consciously practice non-judgment. And we consciously meet them where they are. And what that means is that we try to create this space where they know, you can call it sacred space, you can call it safe space, but they know when they come into the yoga room, whether it's just a break room, they know that this is a place where we're all going to be respected. They're going to be respected. We expect them to respect.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.